everybody. So I have to tell you this very funny thing that's happening right now is that I have this weird thing attached to my face, and I feel like I'm in Rent, the musical. Anybody ever seen it? So I'm like, anyway, so the first thing I want to do tonight is, as I try to do all the time that I speak in public, is just to acknowledge that the site of this research, which is Fort McMurray and the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, are on the traditional lands of the Sekani, Slavey, Beaver, Cree, and Saulteaux people, and also the Métis Nation of Alberta. And I thank them for making it possible for me to do this work. I'd also like to acknowledge the people of Fort McMurray. They've been so generous, and I'm an entire outsider to their community. I had literally never been to Fort Mac before the fire, and I've been overwhelmed with the support they've given me to this project, and it's really truly been an honor to learn from them and to be the keeper of some of their stories. One more thing before I switch my slide is that before I get started, I want to just let you know too that according to best practices of emergency and disaster management, which from now on I'll call EDM just for short sake, everyone up in Fort Mac and throughout the entire Royal Municipality of Wood Buffalo did what they were supposed to do. They did everything by the book. They followed best practices to a T. What I found, though, is that we maybe need to add some chapters to the book in order to think about the health and welfare of family pets so that they can be safely, efficiently, and effectively incorporated into emergency preparedness, disaster management, and post-event recovery. So you all know the basic gist of this, right? So May 1st last year, a wildfire began just southwest of Fort McMurray. 2 days later, on Wednesday, May 3rd, it was burning out of control, and by 7 p.m. that day, Wednesday, May 3rd, the entire city of Fort Mac was under a mandatory evacuation order. The fire destroyed approximately 2,400 homes across Fort Mac and the surrounding regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, before continuing to spread across northern Alberta and into Saskatchewan, and it was finally declared under control on July 5th, 2016. Now, the way you know that everybody up in Fort Mac did exactly what they were supposed to do is that there were no human casualties as a consequence of this fire, at least not as a direct consequence. All 88,000 residents of Fort Mac and the surrounding RMWB made it out of that disaster area. They were all safely evacuated. They were spread far and wide throughout the province and, in fact, all over the country to lodges and hotels and university dorms, and some people went back east and some people went to Vancouver, and lots of people went everywhere. Unfortunately, their companion animals, a good many of them, were not so fortunate. So I want to draw your attention to the geography of Fort McMurray, because one of the major obstacles here was the way the town is laid out. So the evacuation of this city was involuntary and it was sudden. And its geography has been described as a one-way in, one-way out. And you can see from the slide here that this is really true. You've got Highway 63 goes north and south, and that's all you're getting. So not only is this city itself one-way in, one-way out, but also the little neighborhoods are also, they're concentric, they're almost cul-de-sacs. So those of you who have been to Fort Mac, you know that there's only one way in and out of these little neighborhoods. And so the RCMP literally blocked off neighborhoods and would not allow people to go back in and get their pets or anything else, cell phones, cell phone chargers, computers, clothes, etc. And so part of the problem, as you might remember, was that the evacuation order came down in the middle of the day on Wednesday, May 3rd, and people were at work, people were at school, it was a regular day. And so the fact that the RCMP had blocked off neighborhoods meant that people were forced to leave pets behind, among other things like toothbrushes. But surely I thought there was a plan, right? I thought surely lessons must have been learned from New Orleans, from High River. As it turns out, though, the short answer is kind of no. It's a bit reductive, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but the other thing that's really important is that the lack of an EDM plan that accounts for companion animals does not distinguish Fort McMurray from most other municipalities across Canada and the US. This is completely normal for places not to have a plan to deal with pets. And because first responders here in Calgary are literally going to have to immobilize me before I'd let them leave my dog, I thought, let's make a plan. So with generous support from the Center for Community Disaster Research here at my home university, Mount Royal, I spent the last 12 months traversing the province. I have conducted semi-structured interviews with as many stakeholders who would talk to me. They were all involved in some way with the Fort Mac animal evacuation process, and all of them, as you might imagine, have very different and definite ideas about what worked, about what successes were, what could work better differently next time, and how to just sort of sort the process so that it's a bit more efficient next time. And there will be a next time because, all day we've been talking about preparedness. And I've been really excited to be able to have the opportunity to talk to folks from the province, from municipalities, and at the community level. So I've really talked to a lot of folks, and I'm about 4 weeks away from finishing. I have a few more interviews left to do, so if you are one of those people who was involved and you want to talk to me, you know where to find me. I would definitely love to chat to you. One of the really awesome things about this, though, right, is sort of silver lining, is that because Alberta is the disaster capital of Canada right now, we actually have a really awesome opportunity to be at the forefront of thinking about how to incorporate companion animals into EDM. And so I really want to take advantage of this opportunity. But to begin, we have to turn to New Orleans. So Hurricane Katrina, 2005, resulted in more than 50,000 forcibly abandoned pets. And so there was no plan. Nobody had a plan. And so since that time, there's been an evolving shift in emergency and disaster management across North America about how to deal with human as well as non-human animals during mass evacuations. Two main issues seem to be driving this shift, and one of them, I just want to sort of go back to this one. You can see these are the roofs of houses, right? So one of them is to force people to evacuate without their pets puts the lives of civilians and first responders at risk. Civilians, because many of them just will not leave without their pets. That's sort of standard. It's pretty standard throughout the research of disasters that folks will not leave. Another reason is that first responders are also responsible not only for each other in a dangerous situation, but also for the lives of those civilians who refuse to leave. So you're putting them at risk in this sort of multiple way. And the third reason why first responders get put at risk is because the spontaneous volunteers will inevitably and surreptitiously enter the evacuated area to rescue the animals that have been left behind. This happened in New Orleans, it happened in Fort Mac, and this is really, really dangerous to humans as well as first responders, as well as to pets, because of a lack of animal handling expertise. Just because a person has a truck and loves animals does not make them qualified to locate, evacuate, and care for pets in a disaster. Particularly when it comes to a city like Fort McMurray, nobody had any earthly idea of the number of exotics that were in that community. And so when you're dealing with a snake and a bearded dragon, you can't just put it in a pickup truck. So the second thing that seems to be driving this shift in terms of thinking about animals in emergency and disaster management is an increased understanding from healthcare professionals, psychologists, social workers about the important contribution that are made by companion animals to human resilience and mental wellness. So healthy people create healthy communities and then contribute to healthy, sustainable communities, right? I said that wrong, but you get what I'm saying. And yes, this is me and Cricket, because I own the copyright to the photo. So a few questions and concerns have popped up. There have been 6 of them, and I'm actually going to talk about just these first 3. So the first is companion animal invisibility. One of the things that's interesting about Alberta is that the Alberta Emergency Management Agency does not yet, and I have that yet in parentheses, right, in my mind, does not yet deal explicitly with companion animals. And the other arm of the disaster stuff, which is Alberta Agriculture and Forestry, is concerned with livestock. So, and of course we've heard all day that the focus of emergency and disaster management as a field is on humans, it's on property, right? And so consequently, officially, family pets get lost in the cracks. The second piece that's come up in my research is that without exception, animal rescue folks report that pet safety in and evacuation from Fort McMurray during the fire was, to put it quite bluntly, a communication gong show. There was a lack of interagency communication between the province and the RMWB, between the RMWB and Fort Mac Animal Control, between officials and volunteer rescue organizations about what was happening, when it was going to happen, how it was going to happen, and who was going to be in charge of it. And a major complaint from human evacuees, so folks that had left and had gone to Edmonton or wherever they ended up, they were trying to locate their pets, but there was no information or confusing information about how to alert first responders that they had left their pet behind. There was no knowledge of what was going on. Nobody had an idea that the first responders actually had a plan, sort of, that they were doing things on the ground that would try to get those pets out. And there was no, eventually, master list of evacuated animals. And the lists that were created didn't have really descriptive factors, right? So, if you have a black cat and it ended up in Red Deer, good luck. I mean, who knows, right? So there were all these confusions. Another really important piece of this communication piece was that veterinarians were concerned about not knowing the pet's medical histories. So if a vet got a dog at the triage center in Edmonton, they didn't know if this dog was on meds, they didn't know if this dog needed special food, anything about, right? So it's important to think about some of that. And then the third piece is a significant complaint from some of the rescue organizations has been that their expertise in managing large-scale animal housing, tracking, and reunification was not recognized by the RMWB, and thus was severely underutilized. And the consequence of this, of course, is that not as many pets made it out as could have, and the reunification process did not go as smoothly as it might have. And then, of course, I have the other three that have shown up in my research, but I'm going to pause them for the moment, and I'm happy to answer questions in the lobby afterwards. So my recommendation from my research is that there really needs to be a cultural shift in EDM. And we have to explicitly start incorporating family pets into all stages of emergency and disaster management, from preparedness to incident management and recovery, with the goal of community resiliency. But because it's emergency preparedness that really is what sets the stage for the success in incident management and recovery, I want to tell you about 4 of the most practical ideas that have emerged from my interviews. The first one is that we learned from the floods in High River that those little window decals we all have on our houses to alert first responders that there's a dog or a cat or a bird or whatever we've got, they don't mean anything. They're not legally binding. So we need to really think about a system to develop an automatic way to give first responders permission to break into homes to retrieve pets. So it's been suggested that this might be modeled after the Alberta Organ and Tissue Donation Registry, right, and linked to a person's driver's license. So if you look up my driver's license number, it will say, oh yeah, she's an organ donor, and I can break into her house to get her pets if the thing's burning down. 2, another suggestion, we need also to create and maintain what I'm kind of calling a province-wide little black book of emergency animal evacuation and reunification info, so that the incident command system team has all they need in one location. I'll come back and talk about ICS in a second. So this could be a website or an app, maybe it's both, that might include qualified animal handlers, especially for exotics, because there were so many exotics in Fort Mac and nobody had any idea that that was happening. Maybe it could also include veterinarians that are willing to do pro bono work in particular communities, local SPCA branches and other animal welfare organizations that likely have, wait for it, people who know what they're doing and supplies. And we think about pet-friendly lodging, boarding kennels, all the things, right? And then a third suggestion that's come up is, what about, and this would help the vets, the veterinarians, what about if we create pet health records database, kind of like the Alberta Health Database, right? So I have my Alberta Health card, I can go to a pharmacy as long as I got my Alberta Health card and they know what drugs I'm on and they'll give them to me, right? Those kinds of things. So wouldn't that be really awesome if we could somehow have that for pets? And it might be linked to animal licensing. Obviously, there are some issues there around the numbers of people who actually license their animals, but it's a work in progress. And then the fourth thing that's sort of come out of my interviews with people is, and this fourth thing would actually solve, I think, most of the 3 before it, is adding some animal welfare experts to the ICS structure. So I want to talk a little bit about how this might work here in Alberta. And for those of you who are non-disaster specialists, the Incident Command System, ICS, is basically just a standardized approach to the command, control, and coordination of emergency and disaster response, right? So this is a rough depiction behind me of an ICS 100-level command and responsibility structure, very fancy. So you see that I've integrated in orange animal welfare specialists at each level. So this is just one possible integrative approach. I actually have an idea for a more complicated one, but I only have 15 minutes, so this is what you get. So this is how we can add some chapters to our best practices of emergency and disaster management. This is how we can do it. We can fill these positions with professionally staffed, qualified animal welfare experts. My caveat here is twofold. One, there's often a big difference between municipal animal control and bylaw officers and animal welfare experts. The two groups don't often get along so well for reasons that are ideological and political. But I am advocating staffing these ICS positions with animal welfare experts. We gotta pay them, we gotta train them, but they know what they're doing. Training them in how to be first responders, but they know how to do animals. The second caveat that I have is that we are so fortunate in our province that we have great capacity in Alberta already. We just need to utilize these folks more effectively. So I'm suggesting that ICS folks, first responders, right, can we identify animal welfare experts at provincial, at regional, at municipal levels to be part of the ICS team in this way that I'm suggesting? We can sign MOUs with targeted animal welfare organizations that their emergency and disaster folks have to be trained in ICS procedures and basic emergency management so that they know how to behave like first responders, right? So that they know what they're doing in a disaster. And then what's really awesome as well is that the training, they should also obviously have some pet emergency services training, but that's something they already know how to do generally anyway. The pet services training is available through the BC-based Canadian Disaster Animal Relief Team, or CDART. They're based in Kelowna. And then the former, we can get right here online free of charge through the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. So if welfare organizations, if animal welfare orgs would agree to do this training and learn how to behave like professional ICS people, then they'd be ready to go. So let me talk about why I think a pet-specific approach like this one would work. And I think there are 3 reasons that it would work. One, it enables efficient and effective communication between and among stakeholders, right? So ICS structure always has a public information officer. So guess what? You're going to solve your problem in dealing with the public because the person who's going to be helping the public information officer knows how people are crazy about their animals, and they're going to help you sort that, right? It's also going to enable interagency communication, because if you've got someone who understands the animal welfare piece working with the folks who are doing the human property piece, then all of a sudden those folks can be better communicators to each other. A second thing is that it assigns qualified experts the responsibility for pet safety, evacuation, and when necessary, mortality, right? Remember, these folks are trained. So you can leave the human property stuff to the first responders who know what they're doing, and then you can leave the animal welfare stuff to the first responders who know what they're doing. And both groups have particular responsibilities, and then therefore the incident commander is not freaking out about animals, which is what happened in Fort Mac, and it doesn't fall to like 5th or 6th priority on the agenda because he's got somebody who's sorting that. He's on it. They're over there, they're on it, right? And then so that lightens the load of the incident commander in a huge way. And then the third reason that I think it's really important that we think about how to make this happen is that it just keeps families together for increased community resiliency. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time that you have listened to me, and please let me know if you want to come talk to me about your work in the Fort Mac pet recovery. I've got 4 more weeks of funding, okay?